So good afternoon, everyone. Now, the last time when we were talking, we had talked till World War, till the beginning of World War II, right? And yeah, the August offer, right? And we had compared the viewpoints of Gandhi, Bose, and Tagore. Gandhi, Bose, and Nehru. So one of the things that we had seen during this period was that as World War II began and the scale of involvement of Indian troops was much bigger than World War I, or 3 or 4 times bigger than World War I. In World War I, roughly 1 million Indian troops were involved. In World War III, more than 3 million Indian troops were involved. So the British dependence on Indian troops increased. And at the same time, what also increased? At the same point of time, the Congress reach amongst the Indian masses had increased as compared to World War I. So the increase in what? The increase in hold of the masses, the increase in hold of the Congress, along with the increasing involvement of Indian troops in World War I, coupled with the fact that the Allies or Britain and France were initially losing the war, all increased what? The bargaining power of the Congress. And so, though in the Wardha session they had argued that they could support the involvement of Indian troops if there was an immediate devolution of power, the British had decided to ignore their position in the Wardha session in 1939. But 9 months later, as France is defeated, as Belgium is defeated, as Netherlands is defeated, you see that who comes in a conciliatory mood? Britain. And Britain gives the August offer. Right? That is where we see for the first time the British offered what? Dominion status, and also to set up a constituent assembly with mainly Indian representation after the war. That is something that happens. And for the first time in the August offer. But the Congress rejected the August offer. Yes, we talked about this, that the Congress rejected the August offer. So that is also something that we must know. And why did the Congress reject the August offer? Because on the one side, Nehru argued that we left the demand for dominion status long back. What we need is complete independence. That's one thing. And the second thing that they had a problem, and the second thing that the Congress had figured out was that as the troop involvement of Indians increase, their bargaining power is actually going to increase vis-a-vis the British. Yes. So we talked about this. Now, that is what I told you. Now, 1940 also is the time, something that I'm going to, so today what we're going to do, 1940-47. तो आज हमें आज़ादी मिल ही जाएगी, लेकिन फिर भी उसके बाद there will be a few more peasant struggles of the 20th century, apart from what we've already discussed. Like there is Bardoli, like there is Telangana, Tebhaga. So there are some of those other things from Pralin's point of view. And there are a few more things like communalism partition that we'll discuss we'll take another class and we'll discuss that. Okay. But by and large till 1947 we'll complete today. Now what do we see is that in 1940 there is another, and you can write with me. Okay. 1940 to 47 we are going to see, and there is a lot that is happening here. Okay. So there's a lot which is happening here. So we have to be, cover all the aspects. In 1940, apart from the August offer, that's one thing that we've already written about. The other thing that is happening in 1940 is what? The other thing which is happening in 1940 is the Lahore session of the Muslim League. The Lahore session of the Muslim League, and it is in this Lahore session of the Muslim League that the Muslim League gave a call for a separate political province for Muslims in the northwest and east, which eventually, and this resolution passed, this was a resolution for a separate province, was passed in 1940. And this resolution is called as a Pakistan Day This resolution is called as the Pakistan Day Resolution of 1940. Okay. Now, why is this resolution important and what is the significance of this? We should know. I mean, unlikely somebody is going to ask you directly in prelims क्योंकि हमारे यहाँ Muslim League पे ज़्यादा question नहीं आते. But still, one must know why are we talking about this. Is that on the 1937 elections, the Muslim League had not registered any significant victories. If you remember, I told you, 1937 elections, they had not registered any significant victory. And so questions were being raised of how popular is the Muslim League amongst the Muslim masses also. And that is why the Muslim League required to take a demand which would capture the imagination of the Muslim masses at least. And clearly, separate electorates had not captured the imagination, in the sense that that was the issue that had failed to resonate with the masses. And so that is also one of the reasons why they could not get a bigger vote share. Now here, what the Muslim League 1940s onwards is resorting to is a politics of fear. Is two things. They're doing two things: a politics of fear and the politics of what? And a politics that now aim to capture the imagination of the masses. How? The politics that aim to capture the imagination of the masses. How? They said that your future of Muslims is unsafe under any political structure dominated by Congress. Okay? So they argued that Congress, under Congress, any political structure which is dominated by Congress, the future of Muslims is insecure. And to secure their own future, they required what? A separate province of their own in the northwest and east. And this is eventually known as the Pakistan Day Resolution. And this is a new demand. Not before, the Muslim League had never formally made such a demand ever before in any of their speeches. And isolated individuals had talked about this idea before, but Muslim League had never talked about. But they are taking this demand. Why? Because this will capture the imagination of the masses also. Okay, there is something concrete that people can easily understand that is there. For example, जैसे ऐसा होता है आज के time पे, you have politicians who will make some new demand that may capture the imagination of masses. की politicians ने बोला कि we will bring back all black money and everybody will get 15 lakh rupees. This is a new demand. It will capture the imagination of the masses.
Sir, even in Punjab, that Akali has said will create Khalistan and then only they get the majority.
So, I mean, yes. Now, one of the things is, okay, let's not go the Khalistan question, because that is a more complicated question. For example, in the 1960s, I'll give you a more concrete example, right? In the 1960s, the Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu, right? They argued that there is a compulsory imposition of Hindi, which shows, because there was a compulsory imposition of Hindi in the late 1950s in all states. So that is what created a certain amount of backlash in these states also. The Dravidian party said that our future is unsafe because our culture, our language is finding no place in the constitutional scheme of things or in the scheme of India. So we should probably separate and create our own state. So because if we remain under such a structure, our culture, our traditions, they will all be marginalized or they will be eliminated. So often a politics of fear is something that captures the imagination of masses anyways. Okay. So for example, what? In America, right, that immigrants are coming. Immigrants are coming, they will flood the country, and then, you know, what will happen, that the immigrants will take over, they will destroy the country, hollow it out. For example, Amit Shah telling that migrants are coming from Bangladesh, घुसपैठिए आ रहे हैं. You know, they are a unnecessary burden. So politics of fear often is something that captures the imagination of masses. This is what the Muslim League is doing here. They are saying that you need to support us and we will demand a separate state, because if you remain under the Congress rule and if any structure is dominated by Congress, Muslims are unsafe and they must demand a separate state. So politics of fear is something which is often a common thing, because nothing captures the imagination better than fear. That's there. I tell you, ki, bhai, this is something that is often resorted to, that if you continue with the same thing, your future is unsafe. If you believe that your future is unsafe under the current structure, you are more likely to galvanize. And that is what the Muslim League is doing at this time. That the Lahore session, the Muslim League, the Pakistan resolution, it represented a more radical turn in the politics of Muslim League. Why does it represent a more radical turn in the politics of Muslim League? Why? It represents a more radical turn, I'm saying, in the politics of Muslim League, because till 1930s, what are they saying? That you give us separate electorates and the demands will be taken care of. But now they're saying separate electorates se kuch nahi hoga. You require a separate state. So that's a more radical turn in the politics of Muslim League, which resorted to a politics of hate, or to a politics of fear, under which they argued that future of Muslims was unsafe under a political structure dominated by the Congress. Okay, that is what they're saying. Now, why is this point important? Because 1940s onwards, you see that the Muslim League gave a number of public speeches. Jinnah gave a number of public speeches. Other Muslim leaders like Liaquat Ali Khan, etc., they also gave a number of public speeches emphasizing this point. So this is leading to more fear and insecurity amongst both Hindus and Muslims in the northwest and east. Okay, that is there. Now this is happening parallelly to what the Congress is doing. Right? Now, that is negotiating with whom? The British. Now, what is happening in 1941? Written this, right? What is happening in 1941 is that a year later, so the August offer had been rejected by the Congress. Now, the August offer had been rejected by the Congress, but the Congress was waiting that the British will come up with a more substantive offer, okay, or better offer than what? The August offer. However, the British were trying to delay. The British were trying to delay the introduction of the August offer. Why? Because the British are trying to buy time. That if the war is ongoing, and if the war comes to a speedy resolution, they will not need to negotiate with the Congress again. So they're trying to buy time, and the Congress is also waiting, but Congress also does not want to give too much time to the British. So Congress is also impatient, and or Congress is not willing to give too much time to the British, and the British are deliberately trying to buy time by delaying the introduction of the next proposal. And it is in this time that in 1941 Congress started what? Individual satyagrahas. Congress started the individual what? Congress started the individual satyagrahas. Okay. Now, what are these individual satyagrahas that Congress started? Congress started the individual satyagrahas, and this is essentially about what? That Congress is saying that if we launch a full scale, Congress is saying that we want to negotiate with the British and we want to build pressure on them. How do we build pressure on them? They said that if we launch a full-scale mass movement against the British, what will happen? All negotiations will break down. Secondly, the British will also respond with the use of full-scale force to try and suppress the movement, and that is something that will make the environment not very conducive for talks. So they want to build pressure, but they don't want to do something that creates a hostile environment. So that is why they said that Congress said, we are not giving a call we are not giving a call against World War II or against involvement of Indian troops in World War II. But if individual congressmen and individual Indians want to express their dissatisfaction, they could do so in their individual capacity. Congress will not give a call, but Congress will not give a call for an anti-war declaration or against the involvement of Indian troops, but nor will it stop individual congressmen. Okay? So if individual congressmen want to express their displeasure, they can do so. But the Congress will not give a formal call for an anti-British struggle at this time. But by allowing individual congressmen to show their displeasure, Congress also was trying to do what? Build pressure so that the British take the Congress seriously. Okay? So this is like a pressure building tactic, you see. That is what they are trying to do so. And that is what individual satyagrahas are. Now this is important from a prelims point of view. Remember, the individual satyagraha is not demanding the overthrow of British. The individual satyagraha is not demanding a direct overthrow of the British rule. The individual satyagraha is demanding that there must be further talks and deliberations. What the individual satyagraha is opposed to is against the involvement of Indian troops in World War II. That is what it is primarily against. So the individual satyagrahas saw people like Vinoda Bhave. Okay. Who is a prominent Gandhian. Bhave was one of the followers of Gandhi, one of the close associates of Gandhi, and even after independence, he continued to stay on the Gandhian part, starting what? The Bhudan movement. Okay. So Vinoba Bhave was one of the individuals who was one of the first individual satyagrahis. What did these individual satyagrahis do? I'll tell you. And apart from this, apart from Vinoba Bhave, you also see whom? Jawaharlal Nehru, who is the second. Others are also there. And one of the things that one sees is more than 25,000 individuals participated in the individual satyagrahas. More than 25,000 individuals participated what? In the individual. More than 25,000 individuals participated in the individual satyagrahas, under these individual satyagrahas, more than 25,000 individuals participated, and they were to adopt an anti-war declaration. They adopted an anti-war declaration, and basically they opposed the involvement of Indian troops in World War II. Anti-war declaration which opposed the involvement of Indian troops in World War II. Okay, that's one thing. And also, they were to start a Delhi Chalo movement. Basically, they were to adopt an anti-war declaration, and as a response to this, what would happen? When they were to adopt an anti-war, once they adopted an anti-war declaration, a number of them were imprisoned. And if they were not imprisoned, they were to adopt a Delhi Chalo resolution and be a part of the Delhi Chalo movement also. So this was their pressure building tactic. Why was this a pressure building tactic? Because if 25,000 people, if thousands of people are coming out on the streets, even when the Congress is not fully organizing a revolt or is not fully organizing an anti-British struggle, this is just a warning shot. If this many people can come out on the streets without Congress actively telling people to come out, then this itself showed that people had a significant amount of discontent. The British must do something to speedily negotiate with whom? Congress. Okay. So, and you see that the individual satyagraha is thus aimed to demonstrate the dissatisfaction of nationalists with British rule, and also demonstrate that nationalist patience was not a sign of what? That nationalist patience was not a sign of what? Weakness. That nationalist patience was not a sign of weakness. That if they are waiting for the British to come up with a proposal, it's not. That nationalist patience is not a sign of, was not a sign of what? Weakness. That if they're waiting for the British to do something, then it's not that they are fools or they can't do something, but they want the British to come up with a reasonable proposal. What is the British response? The British response is they come up with the next proposal, and that is what? That is the Cripps mission. Okay. So in 1942, you see the British come up with the next proposal, and that is the Cripps mission. They come up with the next proposal, and that is the Cripps mission. Cripps mission. Okay. Stafford Cripps was a part of the British cabinet, and a committee was sent under him to come to India to deliberate with Indians and propose the next devolution of power that could be agreed upon by Indians as well as the British. And this was the Cripps mission. What does the Cripps mission say? The Cripps mission, the British response sent the Cripps mission, and the Cripps mission is firstly saying, what again? It's partly a repeat of the August offer. It is, in fact, it is largely a repeat of the August offer. There is only a minor change that we'll talk about, but it is largely a repeat of the August offer. So firstly, they offered what? The Cripps mission offered dominion status. And the Cripps mission offered dominion status. Secondly, the Cripps mission argued what? A constituent assembly would be established after the war composed only of Indians. There I had said mainly of Indians. Where? In August offer, we had said that Constituent Assembly will mainly be composed of Indians. They are saying here that it will be composed only of Indians. Okay, that is there. So basically they are saying that only Indians will decide the fresh constitution, but it will largely stay as a dominion. They also make another point, and this is extremely objectionable to the Congress, that it is extremely objectionable to the Congress that no future constitution would be adopted without the consent of no future constitution would be adopted without the consent of minority. This is a point made before also, and there is a point made also. This is not the major objection to them. What is the major objection to them is something related here, and that is about what? That those states not willing to form, not willing to join, those states not willing to join those states not willing to what? Join the union could form a union of their own. Form a union of their own. Those states not willing to join the union could form a union of their own. Now, what does this mean? That, and this is partly hinting at what? The Pakistan Day resolution, partly, I mean, they're not explicitly saying, and it's not only about them. It is also about the princely states. If princely states want to form a union of their own, they could do so. If other states wanted to form a union of their own, they could also do so. And this is something that is a major problem. This is something which is strongly opposed by whom? Congress. Congress says that this will bring about what? This will bring about the balkanization of India. That India will, in this way, India will be broken into a number of states. And this is something that they are opposed to. So the Congress rejected what? The Congress rejected the Cripps mission report. Why? Because whether it was on dominion, status, or it was their objection to this, indirectly what they were referring to was a right to secession. So Congress was opposed to what? The Congress was opposed to two things. Primarily, the whole talk about dominion status. As I said, we should be given what? Complete independence. And they're also opposed to this right to, indirect right to what? Secession, which is to the indirect right to secession, which is being offered here. Okay. So that is something which is Congress is, that is something that Congress is strongly opposed to. Is this point clear?
So, but why would British introduce this?
Why are the British saying all this? Is primarily because the British are saying what? They are opening the bargaining chips against the Congress. That okay, if Congress thinks that it is very smart, that it can use the leverage that of World War II against the Congress, against the British, then the British can also use a leverage against the Congress. And that is what? Organizations like the Muslim League or the princely states. And to that extent, it is saying that, okay, what they want is independence from the British, and they are trying to take that leverage. We can also build leverage against the Congress by supporting other what? Rivals of the Congress. So that is why you see that this is happening. I mean, that's how negotiations work, right? So in that context, this is what is, see, this is what is happening. Now, is this much clear? Anything you want to know? Anything you want to ask till here, firstly? From your prelims point of view, you should remember, more importantly, provisions, and also why the Congress rejected a particular offer. Yes. हाँ, पोस्ट डेटेड चेक वही बात है. पोस्ट डेटेड चेक का मतलब क्या है कि डोमिनियन स्टेटस की डिमांड हम बहुत पहले छोड़ आए हैं. अभी दैट वाज द चेक ऑफ डोमिनियन स्टेटस वाज मेंट टू बी इनकैश्ड इन 1928. यू आर गिविंग अ पोस्ट डेटेड चेक. और दूसरा दोनों चीजें हैं. बोथ द थिंग्स व्हाट यू आर सेइंग इज आल्सो राइट, दैट क्या होगा तो ठीक है, अभी क्या है, that is also very important. Immediate, that is why in the Varda session they said there must be an immediate devolution of power. You can't just promise what will happen after the war, because if World War I was any experience, what we got after the war was definitely not genuine self-government. That is also the reason that they are saying that there is a post-dated check. कि बाद में जैसा देते हैं कि अगले 6 महीने के चेक ले लो, अभी बाउंस हो गया आपका चेक. व्हाट इज दिस चेक बाउंसेस? ऐसा होता है ना कि आपने बोला सर ये EMI के ये 10 चेक हैं फॉर 10,000 रुपीज. आफ्टर 2 months चेक से स्टार्टेड बाउंसिंग. मतलब व्हाट? दैट यू बीन प्रॉमिस्ड समथिंग बट यू डोंट एंड अप गेटिंग इट. दैट पॉसिबिलिटी इज ऑल्सो देयर. फर्स्टली तो वी हैव लेफ्ट दैट डिमांड लॉन्ग बैक. इवन इफ देन ऑल्सो वी अज्यूम that okay, where is the reason for Indians to trust the British as that they will actually transfer power. So that is something what they mean. Clear? Anything else? कुछ और पूछना चाह रहे हैं? Okay. Now this is the, so Congress is clearly what? Rejecting this proposal of the Cripps mission. That's why it's also called the post-dated check by Gandhi. Now, next is what is happening after this. Now, there are two things which are happening after this. One is happening in the militant phase of the Indian freedom struggle, and the other is happening in the Congress. Okay. So, Congress पे हम बाद में आएंगे. We are first talking about the militant phase of the freedom struggle from here on, where you talk about whom? Subhash Chandra Bose, INA, Rin Mutiny and all those things. So you can give the heading. देखिए आपको question ऐसा भी आ सकता है, impact of World War II on the Indian freedom struggle. So let's discuss, then I'll just briefly tell you what all things you have to write if the question comes on impact of World War II. So right now we're discussing militant nationalism, when? During the 1940s. Okay. ठीक है. मिलिटेंट नेशनलिज्म और टेररिज्म में क्या डिफरेंस है? देखिए, बैक देन एंड व्हेन बिपिन चंद्र वाज रिटन आल्सो, यू नो, सर I'll tell you the context. पहले आप ये समझिए, फिर मैं बाद में दूसरी बता दूं. Militant nationalism, देखिए, भगत सिंह also said that why am I a terrorist? He said that I am a terrorist. Now terrorism then did not have a negative connotation as you see today. Today terrorism is seen as an act of nonsensical or mindless violence. Okay? And this word terrorism today is differentiated from something that's called, पढ़ा होगा आपने, Maoist insurgency, right? What is insurgency? Insurgency is also about picking up arms. Okay, and but what is the difference between an insurgent picking up arms and a terrorist is that an insurgent is picking up arms because his demands are perhaps justified, and his demands have been largely left unmet despite all efforts. So because his demands have been left largely unmet despite all efforts, he is left with no option but to pick up arms. That is insurgency. आपने इस शब्द और जगह देखा होगा, नागा इंसर्जेंसी, है ना? Maoist insurgency. Insurgency is something which is not terrorism. Today, when we use the word, to differentiate terrorism from armed rebellions, insurgencies are what? It's a good question. What you're asking is a good question. In terms of कि सर हम ये बहुत सारे शब्द देखते हैं, इनके क्या मतलब क्या है, पता तो होना चाहिए. हाँ, तो अल्ट्रा वाला भी बता दूंगा अभी. So basically, armed rebellion are the ones which is also associated with insurgency, where there is a specific demand, which perhaps has been met, has been largely left unmet. In terrorism, today, when we say it is a senseless act of violence, and where there is either an irrational demand at its base or unjustified demand at its base, or that is what terrorism. सर आप बोलेंगे कि सर आप कौन होते हैं ये बताने वाले कि कौन सी डिमांड जस्टिफाइड है, कौन सी अनजस्टिफाइड. इसीलिए तो आप क्या पढ़ रहे हैं, एथिक्स, है ना. तो वहां का दिमाग आपको यहां लगाना है. ओके, दैट ethics, when is it justified for an individual to pick up arms? What does ethics say? In international relations, you say that states can pick up arms in self-defense.
So when all options are exhausted.
Yeah, so in self-defense, one can pick up arms. So आपने बोला कि हमने you are a tribal individual. आपने बोला हमने सरकार को लिखा चिट्ठी कि भाई don't take our forest. सरकार is not listening. आपने फिर भी बहुत लेटर लिखे. फिर आपने बोला चलो कोई नहीं, डीएम साहब से मिलके आते हैं. ऑल ट्राइबल्स वेंट टू डीएम साहब लाठी चार्ज ट्राइबल्स. देन ट्राइबल्स डिसाइडेड टाइम इज अप फॉर डीएम साहब एज वेल एज गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया. सो व्हाट डू दे से कि मारो. दैट इज व्हाई, बिकॉज वी वांट टू, व्हाट इज द डिमांड, दैट द कंट्रोल ऑफ द फॉरेस्ट मस्ट बी लेफ्ट विद द ट्राइबल्स हु लिव्ड इन द फॉरेस्ट. दैट इज व्हाट मेक्स इट अ इंसर्जेंसी. Because this is a demand which can still be met, and a solution can be brought to this armed rebellion also. They can be brought within the political struggle. If the demand is met, the constitution is amended, etc., or whatever needs to be done, a new law needs to be introduced, can be done, the demands can be met. They will give up the demand, they will give up arms. लेकिन आपने बोला नहीं, अभी हमने तो इस्लामिक स्टेट ही बनाना है ना, कि क्या कि और कुछ नहीं, मतलब there will be, we will impose Sharia, we'll impose this, we'll impose that, etc. And if your demand is largely irrational, or something which is perhaps one could say grossly unethical, and for meeting that you're picking up arms, one would say today that is terrorism. तो ये तो आज के, तभी in most of government documents Maoism is not treated as terrorism. It's called Maoist insurgency. It is an internal security problem, but it is not called टेररिज्म. देखिए कई नेता लोग आजकल कहते हैं कि माओइज्म इज ऑल्सो टेररिज्म, बट नो गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया डॉक्यूमेंट सेज द माओइज्म इज टेररिज्म. दिस टर्म, इट्स द नक्सल इंसर्जेंसी और द माओइस्ट इंसर्जेंसी. Okay, that's the difference between the two. Now back then there was no such thing. In the sense, the word terrorism then was to be used in this context, कि we will strike terror in the minds of British rulers, and we will terrorize them to give up the control of India by doing what? Assassinating unpopular British officials and all of that. So the word terrorism then did not have a negative connotation, because the demand there also was justified, that the British must devolve powers to Indians, and they're using violence for it. So back then terrorism and militant nationalism. ये तो अब अंग्रेजी का शब्द है, उसमें कोई डिफरेंस नहीं है. बेलिजरेंट्स क्या है, मतलब आप बस अभी नाराज हैं, गुस्सा हैं, आप लड़ने के लिए तैयार हैं. देखिए अल्टीमेटली जो मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ, यही दो टर्म्स में डिफरेंस है. अभी इनके पर्यायवाची भी होते हैं, सिनोनिमस शब्दों में कोई डिफरेंस नहीं है ना. दिस इज द डिफरेंस. दैट इज व्हाई नक्सलिज्म इज नॉट टेररिज्म, एंड दैट इज व्हाई दे आर टर्म्ड इंसर्जेंट्स. अब बेलिजरेंट्स हैं, आप वो अंग्रेजी का शब्द है, उसमें कुछ और कंसेप्चुअल डिफरेंस नहीं है. Terrorism then was not considered to be a mindless act of violence. तो कई लोगों ने बोला बाद में हमारी हिस्ट्री टेक्स्ट बुक के बारे में कि why should we use the word terrorism? Perhaps a better description would be to call them militant nationalism. Those nationalists who have picked up arms for the cause of Indian independence. तो वो हो गया militant nationalism. ये एक सेकंड पहले ये समझ में आया? हाँ, अब बताइए. हाँ. देखिए वो अलग लाइन है कि वन मैन फ्रीडम फाइटर इज अनदर मैन्स टेररिस्ट, है ना. वो पॉइंट नहीं है. आप मत बोलिए टेररिस्ट, कोई दिक्कत नहीं है. इसीलिए मैं बार बार बोलता हूँ मिलिटेंट नेशनलिज्म. जब भगत सिंह को कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है अपने आप को टेररिस्ट कहने में, तो आपको क्या प्रॉब्लम है यार? It's as simple as that. He's saying, he is trying to explain why I am a terrorist. He has no problems. हाँ, तो इसीलिए तो मैंने बोला कि आज क्या कह रहे हैं इसको, वो कह लीजिए, खत्म हो गई बात. सॉल्यूशन है इस बात का ये, ठीक है. अब ये तो थोड़ी बोलेंगे कि नॉन मिलिटेंट नेशनलिस्ट. अब ये आर्म्स उठाएं तो कुछ तो बोलना ही पड़ेगा ना आपको. वन ऑफ द थिंग्स इज दिस इज मिलिटेंट नेशनलिज्म. तभी हम कश्मीरी मिलिटेंसी को टेररिज्म से अलग कंसेप्चुअली कहते हैं, है ना. अभी आप व्हेन यू मे और मे नॉट एग्री, there may be a Kashmiri individual youth who may have picked up arms saying that Kashmir must be an independent state. So perhaps if Kashmir was ever to become independent, he will be called a militant nationalist. And we also say right now Kashmiri militancy. When Kashmiri local youth pick up arms, but if you are sending in armed individuals from Pakistan into Kashmir to kill Indian security forces, that is called as a terrorist attack. So you get that difference between terrorism and militancy. वो conceptual difference है. Okay? अब वो मैंने समझा दिया, ठीक है. अब आप समझ जाएंगे कि कब को कैसा कह रहे हैं. But if you are picking up arms, तो militancy कहा जाएगा. That is clear. Okay? So that is where that's there. Now, okay, come back. What we were saying, 1942. Abhi 1943, 1942 onwards, we're talking about the role of militant nationalism during 1940s. What is the other subject that you are studying right now? Ancient. वो मैम जो आपको पढ़ा रही है अच्छा पढ़ा रही है, ठीक है ना. दिमाग हर चीज में इतना नहीं लगाना होता है कि मजा आ रहा है. अरे क्या है एंशिएंट हिस्ट्री में, क्या मजा आएगा आपको? अभी मैं आपको पढ़ाऊंगा जब इटालियन हिस्ट्री, मैं आपको बोलूंगा लोम्बार्डिया में ये हुआ, वेनिशिया में ये हुआ. ना आपने सुना लोम्बार्डिया कहाँ है, ना आपने सुना वेनिशिया कहाँ है. समथिंग विच इज रिलेटेबल इज इनहेरेंटली इंटरेस्टिंग. समथिंग विच इज नॉट रिलेटेबल इज इनहेरेंटली डिफिकल्ट. अभी आपको जैनिज्म बुद्धिज्म की फिलॉसफी कोई पढ़ाने लगे तो अभी आपको गिव अप हो जाएगा. और तो इट इज, आई मीन देयर आर सम थिंग्स विच आर नॉट वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग, बट वो वैसे भी आपको करना है. मतलब यू कांट लीव देम ऑल्सो, क्योंकि अभी कितने अच्छे खासे क्वेश्चन प्रीलिम्स में आ रहा है फ्रॉम दोज थिंग्स. सो वन, नॉट एवरीथिंग कैन बी एज इंटरेस्टिंग, यू नो. Maybe for example when we discuss world history, there are some things which you will find inherently more disinteresting also, but you can't leave them also. अभी आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि सर दो ही तो सवाल आते हैं छोड़ देते, दो ही दो करके ही सब आप छोड़ देंगे. तो दो आते हैं वर्ल्ड हिस्ट्री से, एक आता है पोस्ट इंडिपेंडेंस से, दो आएंगे, एक या दो आएगा आर्ट एंड कल्चर से, तीन आएंगे मॉडर्न इंडियन से. आप सब छोड़ दीजिए, एक एक दो दो सब छूट जाएंगे, राइट. सो यू हैव टू, यू कांट बी कि नहीं सर ये तो लेस इंपॉर्टेंट है इसको छोड़ देते हैं. दैट अप्रोच डज नॉट वर्क एनी मोर इन यूपीएससी. एक टाइम था जब ये हो जाता था, क्योंकि 60 मार्कर्स क्वेश्चन यूज्ड टू कम, तो एंड देवर ऑप्शंस, यू कुड चूज विच टू डू विच नॉट टू डू. अब वैसा कुछ नहीं है, अब तो करना है और सब करना है, राइट. सो इन दैट कॉन्टेक्स्ट डू नॉट, you know, you can't think about leaving also a topic, and it's important as well. Now the next thing to talk about is militant nationalism. During 1940s, okay. And what do we see here? Firstly is the role of two things. One is the INA uprising. देखिए, now this formation of the INA INA was formed how? What's the background context of this? 1942, 1943, INA is formed. Why? Primarily because Indian soldiers were there in Burma. Okay. Now, so obviously, my diagrams are not good, but whatever. Indian soldiers were there in Burma, and adjacent to Burma, you see there is what? The Indochina region. Okay, the Indochina region where you have Cambodia, where you have Laos, where you have Vietnam. This region was occupied by Japan by 1941. If you remember, I had told you. Yes, in the last class. Now, once they occupied Japan, they started moving towards Burma. Burma then was a British colony. So, Burma then was a British colony, and British troops. Burma then was a British colony, and British troops were stationed in the region. Now, once the Japanese troops started coming in, the British faced a stiff challenge from the Japanese, and the Japanese forced the British to withdraw from the region. And British lost its control over Malaysia and Burma. Okay? Malaysia इसके नीचे है. ये यहाँ ये region का map पूरा देख लेना है आपने. वैसे भी ऋषिकेश sir will be discussing with you etc. लेकिन फिर भी आपको पता देखिए जहाँ जहाँ आपका मेजर IR का इम्पोर्टेंस है वो वाले जियोपॉलिटिकल मैप्स पूछे जाते हैं. हर कहीं का नहीं पूछा जाता है कि आपसे लैटिन अमेरिका का मैप पूछने लगेंगे. They will ask you, I'm telling you, this year, ये तो बार बार पूछा ही गया है, मलक्का रीजन, मलेशिया, साउथ ईस्ट एशिया वाला. That's one because of the Malacca Strait. वो उधर हॉर्न ऑफ अफ्रीका पे जो है ना, the Suez and all, you know, because India also got a naval base there. And उसके बाद मोदी जी and there have been so many other prime minister, president, vice president, all have visited 26 times East Africa. तो ईस्ट अफ्रीका में जो 4-5 स्टेट्स है, वेयर इज केन्या, वेयर इज तंजानिया, वेयर इज मोजाम्बिक, ओके, वेयर इज रवांडा, वेयर इज ब्रुंडी, और इनके कैपिटल्स कौन है, कौन लैंडलॉक्ड है, वेयर इज इथोपिया, वेयर इज जिबूती, ये आपको पता होना चाहिए. विच इज लैंडलॉक्ड, विच इज देयर कैपिटल, हाउ डू यू अरेंज देम नॉर्थ टू साउथ, साउथ टू नॉर्थ, ये आपको पता होना चाहिए. वैसे ही सेंट्रल एशिया, वो 5 कंट्रीज, which of them is landlocked, how many of them are landlocked, which is doubly landlocked, capital from east to west, west to east, ये आपको पता होना चाहिए. उसके अलावा where in West Asia, where Israel, Palestine, Syria, वो Dead Sea, Black Sea, जौन सी सी हैं, वो आपको you must know from your prelims point of view. Questions पहले भी आए हैं and will come again also. Get it? So that is something that you have to do. So you remember that also. Kelly, coming back here. So basically, the British troops were attacked by whom? The Japanese troops, and forced the British to withdraw. Now the British withdrew. The British hastily withdrew. The European commanders or the British commanders and some Indian troops also, but left behind almost 15,000 Indian troops. And left behind almost 15,000 Indian troops, which were at the mercy of the Japanese, which were left at the mercy of Japanese, and the Japanese took them as the prisoners of war. Now the Japanese were known not to be very polite with the prisoners, and the Japanese were known as brutal fighters in any war. So the British basically left behind 15,000 Indian soldiers at the mercy of Japanese. And this was something that did not go down well with a number of Indian soldiers. They argued that the British are not very responsible. Why? Because when they were withdrawing, they gave a priority to withdraw the British soldiers and British commanders and left behind the Indian soldiers at the mercy of the Japanese. So many Indian soldiers argue that these British officers do not deserve the loyalty of Indians and the Indian soldiers. And so you see that Mohan Singh, who was also one of the soldiers in the British Indian Army, he gave, and you see basically in 1942-43, following, you can write with me, following the British withdrawal, following the British troop withdrawal from Burma, following the British troop withdrawal from Burma, following the British troop withdrawal from Burma, 15,000 soldiers or British Indian soldiers were left at mercy of Japanese, who took them as prisoners of war. Mohan Singh envisioned the idea of INA, the Azad Hind Fauj, or the Indian National Army. And Mohan Singh is saying to the Japanese that, you want to overthrow the British, we also want to overthrow the British. That the British do not deserve our loyalty, we also want to overthrow the British. And we will join hands with you. Because now that you have taken Burma, the next target is what? To enter through Nagaland into India. To enter through Nagaland into India. To enter through Nagaland into India. And for this, we are the ones who have a better knowledge of the local terrain also, and we can assist you in overthrowing the British from the region. And this is the proposal they make to the Japanese. The Japanese agree to involve these British Indian soldiers also, and agreed to the idea of formation of the INA. However, there were 15,000 Indian soldiers. Mohan Singh was of the opinion that all these 15,000 soldiers must be made a part of the INA. But not everybody shared the enthusiasm of Mohan Singh also. There were debates amongst them also. And more importantly, the Japanese were not also of the opinion to create a INA of 15,000 strong Indian soldiers. Rather, they said that 1,500 soldiers out of 15,000 can be picked up to form the initial segment of the INA, which will assist whom? The Japanese troops. And this is where you see 1943 tak INA is formed. Who is also coming by this time in the INA is Subhash Chandra Bose. Subhash Chandra Bose had formed the forward bloc in India in 1940. In 1941, he had escaped from India. First went to Germany, and by 1942, from Germany he was sent to Japan. And in Japan, he is talking to the Japanese government, and also he is talking to the Japanese government, and also he is put in touch with the INA, and he takes an active leadership role within the INA also. Now, this is what is happening. Now so by 1943, you see the INA is fully formed, up and about and running. And you see what is happening is also the provisional Indian government was established, which was recognized by whom? Axis powers. That is Germany, Japan and Italy. Germany, Japan and Italy recognized a provisional Indian government in exile, established under Subhash Chandra Bose and based in Singapore and Rangoon. Singapore and Rangoon, yes, Singapore, Burma, Rangoon and Singapore in the Malaysia region. A provisional Indian headquarters was set up here, Indian flag was unfurled, etc., etc. Now, in 1944, by the beginning of 1944, happens the crucial battle The Battle of Kohima. Kohima in Nagaland. The first and the only battle fought on Indian soil during World War II. Okay, the Battle of Kohima between the Japanese troops on the one side, supported by the INA, and the British Indian troops on the other side. The Battle of Kohima happened when in 1944, in the beginning of 1944, and this was the battle in which Indian troops are fighting on both the sides. You know, they're fighting on the sides of the Japanese also, they're fighting on the sides of British also. And well, there are many such stories in World War I also, where brothers, and there's one famous story I'll tell you in world history. The one famous story of two brothers fighting on different sides in World War I. So, I mean, that also tells you, in a way, it also at times brings about the futility of the war. In the sense that in 1943, Indian soldiers are fighting on both the sides of the war. Now, whom do you say is doing their job? Well, if the INA soldiers were nationalists, what about the British Indian soldiers? So, I mean, these are kind of questions that you have to understand. There's no yes or no. Right? And it also exposes more deeper philosophical questions. Who is right? Is a soldier who obeys his duty towards his government right? Or is a soldier who rebels against his government for the greater cause right? Who is right? These are ethical dilemmas. है ना? Ethical dilemma is never between a right and a wrong. Ethical dilemma is either between two rights or two wrongs. Is about choosing the lesser evil. Right? So that's the kind of a dilemma. So let's not get there, but this is what is there. Battle of Kohima. Now in the Battle of Kohima, what happens? Who is defeated? The Japanese. The Japanese are for the first time in World War II, from 1934 to 1939 to 1944, the Japanese are defeated in a major manner in Asia, in the Battle of Kohima. On the one side, Britain and Japan is fighting here. But in 1942, fighting had also begun in the Pacific between Japan and USA. After what? The Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941. There is the Pearl Harbor attack. सबने नाम सुना है, right? वो एक पिक्चर भी बनी थी Ben Affleck वाली, Pearl Harbor, right? So basically, the Japanese bombed the Americans. Then the Americans and Japanese were fighting in Pacific. Already, Japan is to fight USA on the one side. Now in 1944, they initially defeated the British, and they were, going strong. But in the Battle of Kohima, the Japanese expansion is stopped. And the British Indian soldiers in the Battle of Kohima played a valuable role in defeating the Japanese in a major way in the Battle of Kohima. And that is why the British consider the Battle of Kohima as one of their top 5 military battles fought in the 20th century. Because it was a decisive battle following which the Japanese started withdrawing from the region. Now the Japanese started withdrawing after the Battle of Kohima, and there's a war cemetery in Kohima where Japanese soldiers were also buried. A couple of years ago when Shinzo Abe visited India, he also visited the northeast, and some of the remains of these Japanese soldiers were sent back to Japan. Now that story apart, what does this tell you is that 1944 onwards, who started withdrawing? Japanese troops. Leaving behind whom? INA soldiers. The Japanese started withdrawing, leaving behind INA soldiers. Now INA soldiers are taken as prisoners of war by whom? They are taken as prisoners of war now by the British, who charge them with sedition, of trying to instigate an armed conspiracy against the British state and British Indian state, and put them on a trial. This is the INA trials. Get the whole story? Yes? So ये उनके साथ ऐसा हुआ, पहले तो ब्रिटिश ने उन्हें छोड़ दिया, फिर जापानीज ने उन्हें छोड़ दिया। फिर उनके कौन याद आया? फिर उन्हें किसने अप्रोच किया? कांग्रेस। We'll talk about. What about Bose? Bose managed to escape, and basically he is not the one who is captured in 1940, in the beginning of 1944. Now what happened to Bose after that? I have no clue. Do not ask me this question कि बोस कहाँ गए, उन्हें किसने मारा, क्या वो जापान में मरे, क्या वो रशिया में मरे, क्या वो इंडिया वापस आ गए? What happened to him? I don't know. Okay, nor are we discussing it. है ना? That's not, UPSC is not going to ask you. Where did Bose die? Did he die in Japan? Did he die in India? Did he die in Russia? है ना? So ऐसा कोई did he die in the aircraft crash? क्या हुआ हमें नहीं पता, ना हमें जानना है. मतलब आप जानना चाहिए, मेरे पास नहीं है जवाब. So that is that. So what is happening? Thus Mohan Singh envisioned the idea of INA, and this is formed after this in 1942 end and 43 beginning. Subhash Bose soon assumed a leadership position Bose soon assumed a leadership position within INA, and he headed the provisional Indian government stationed in Rangoon, then in Singapore, and then in also he unfurled the Indian flag in Andaman and Nicobar. The Andamans, I think when I was discussing the tribal, we have, okay, one thing I think we have remained is we have not discussed the tribal and peasant issues. No, right? So we have to discuss that as well. So you would have read in the newspaper recently on Andamans. Huh? So when I visited Andamans a year or two ago, anyways, you know, the Sentinelese are known for not being very friendly, and very rightly so. Because every other tribe in Andamans which has maintained a contact with, you know, the mainland people, their culture, their ways of living, etc., have largely been destroyed. Okay, change is a very mild word there, and the government recognizes that, and also because these people fall ill because of contacts, you know, because they're not immunized, and you know, getting in touch with strangers, foreigners, etc. Foreigners, by that foreigner they don't mean Indians, you know, Americans only, koi bhi who's not a native inhabitant is something that is a threat to their lives also. So that is that, and the Sentinelese are some of the, I mean, if you look at the history of Andamans, it's splendidly amazing, in the sense that Andamans, they trace their origin to the Horn of Africa. These are the African origin, African Negroid races in India. When you look at the when you look at the Onges, especially, if you look at Onges, I mean, they distinctively, racially look very distinctive from the rest of India. So आपको वैसे भी prelims के लिए ये पता होना चाहिए कितनी tribes हैं वहाँ, कौन कौन सी tribes हैं, who are the Jaravas, who are the Onges, who are the Sentinelese, who are the Great Andamanese. ये major tribal groups हैं, okay, where in the Andaman region. ऐसी चीजें वो prelims में पूछ लेते हैं. Okay, that which of the following are the native inhabitants of the Andaman and Nicobar? ये चारों tribes के नाम दे देंगे. They'll ask you. Okay, so that's something that you must know. Now, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, that is where they formed the provisional Indian government also. And however, you see in 1944, in the Battle of Kohima, the Japanese troops, in the Battle of Kohima, the Japanese troops were defeated who withdrew. The Japanese troops were defeated who withdrew. Japanese troops were defeated who withdrew from the Japanese troops were defeated who withdrew from the region, leaving behind INA troops. The Japanese troops withdrew from the region, leaving behind INA troops. Now, what is the attitude of Congress towards INA, Gandhi towards INA? We'll talk about that also. But they withdrew from the region, leaving behind INA troops who are now taken as prisoners of war. Taken as prisoners of war by British. Prisoners of war by British. Now the British put them on a trial, and this is what is the INA trials. The British are concerned about this INA business. Why? The British put them on a trial because the British are like, if we allow this activity to pass unpunished, then it will set a precedent. Why? Other British Indian soldiers can also think it is okay to do what? Revolt against the British, pick up arms against the British and escape without any serious consequences. So British want to send a stern message that they will not tolerate any such kind of discontent or such kind of armed rebellion. And so they try to make an example of these INA soldiers and to send across a message. What they did? What they did was they organized a public trial. They organized a public trial in the Red Fort. Okay. And on trial were put three soldiers of the INA, one Hindu, one Muslim and one Sikh. Also to send this message that any kind of indiscipline within the army coming from any section will not be tolerated. And you see that Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon, a Sikh, Prem Kumar Sehgal, a Hindu, and Shahnawaz Khan, a Muslim, all were put on trial. So all of them were what? Put on trial. So, and these, and these trials are the ones which are happening during this period. What? In 1944. These are the trials. They're captured in 1944, brought back to India, and in 1945 they're put on a trial. Now, what is the response of the Congress? The Congress is saying that we'll do our best to protect the INA trial subjects and the INA soldiers who are now prisoners under the British. So the Congress said that what will we do? That from November 5th to November 11th, 1945, Congress started what? Started what was called the INA week. Firstly, Congress said that we have what? Lawyers. So our lawyers who are Congress members themselves will fight what? Their cases. Lawyers will themselves fight the cases of these INA soldiers, Prem Kumar Sehgal and all these individuals. And you see people like Jawaharlal Nehru fought cases, people like Jawaharlal Nehru, you see people like Jawaharlal Nehru, Tej Bahadur Sapru, and other individuals. They fought cases against whom? They fought the cases for the INA trial subjects. Also, the Congress simultaneously organized public speeches openly supporting the plight of the INA soldiers. It organized public speeches, plays, etc., and openly supported that the INA trials subjects must be set free. They must not be punished, that they were not wrong, because the British were the ones who had deserted them first anyways. So they, and what are they arguing for? They were arguing for Indian independence. That is something that is our aim also. So in that context, they openly professed support for INA soldiers, gave public speeches, organized plays, etc., and celebrated what was called the INA week from November 5th to November 11, 45. And they also did what? They also, on November 12, 1945, they celebrated the INA day, and they celebrated the INA day also, and collected and also made an INA fund to collect funds to support the families of these soldiers. Okay, so they collected funds also to support the families of these soldiers. All of this is being done by the Congress. What is the Congress trying to do? The Congress, we'll see, is trying to rebuild the nationalist momentum around the issue of the plight of the INA soldiers. I have not talked to you about the Quit India movement right now. I'll talk about that also. But the Quit India movement happened in 1942 and 1943. And by and large, the Quit India movement had died down by 1943. Now this INA uprising is providing Congress the momentum to revive the nationalist activity again around an issue that could capture the consciousness of whom? The masses. That is what they are doing, openly supporting the INA soldiers and arguing that they must not be put on a trial and they must be set free. That is what the Congress is doing. So that is why it's very difficult to eliminate Congress from the Indian freedom struggle. क्योंकि ये हर जगह पहुंच जाते हैं, पीछे पीछे से घूमते घामते, they'll reach everywhere. Okay, that is there. And what about what is the attitude of Gandhi? Now Gandhi is not really keen about this whole armed struggle, etc. But even then, Gandhi also praised the valor of the INA soldiers and argued that perhaps their contribution must be recognized, even though he did not support the armed struggle. So that is something which is there. And ultimately, the Congress puts its weight behind whom? The INA soldiers, by providing them legal assistance, by organizing public movements and rallies in their support, and arguing that they must be set free. That is there. Okay. So that's one of the first things about the INA trials. That the INA trials from November 5th to November 11th, 1945, the INA trials, not from November 5th to November 11th, the INA trials in November 1945 aimed to set an example by putting on trial a Hindu soldier, a Muslim, and a Sikh, that is Prem Kumar Sehgal, Gurbaksh Singh, Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon. These names you must know from your prelims point of view. A Hindu soldier and a Muslim one as well, and that is Shahnawaz Khan. Yes, Shahnawaz Khan, Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon and Prem Kumar Sehgal. Congress offered support to INA trial subjects by celebrating the INA week from November 5th to November 11th, 1945. Celebrated the INA week from November 5th to November 11th, 1945. And gave public speeches organized rallies and plays. Gave public speeches, organized rallies and plays. Gave public speeches, organized rallies and plays. And you see that, so gave public speeches, organized rallies and plays, and raised nationalist consciousness around the plight of INA soldiers. Also, they also established the INA fund. Why am I telling you all of this? क्योंकि ये मेंस में क्वेश्चन 2 बार आया है. The significance of INA trials and or the significance of INA uprising and Rin mutiny in the Indian freedom struggle. That is why we are discussing all of this in this detail. So they also raised, and अभी मोदी जी वैसे ही एक और फ्रीडम इंडिपेंडेंस डे बदल जाए उनका बस चले तो है ना, तो वो so they also raised INA, they also raised funds, right? The INA, and they established what is the INA fund for the families of INA soldiers. Establish funds for the families of INA soldier. ये तो सारी चीजें where? These all things are happening where? In 1945. What is the response? The British response is they continue the trials, but then something else happens which changes the British attitude, and that is what? The Rin mutiny. The Royal Indian Navy mutiny. The second time when in the army there is a act of indiscipline in quick succession of 1945. May pehle to 1942 onwards there's formation of INA, then there is Rin. Quick succession. And this also partly brings back the memories of 1857. The British take the Royal Indian Navy mutiny very, very seriously. Okay. Now, this is happening in 1946. देखिए तभी जब भी कुछ आर्मी के बीच में कॉन्फ्लिक्ट हो, आर्मी और सिविलियन गवर्नमेंट. See, in India, there is one thing I'll tell you, very unique in South Asia, that Indians take for granted, is the civil-military balance, which is actually in favor of whom? Civilians. Pakistan, we know, military, often dictatorships have been established. In Sri Lanka, for example, in Sri Lanka, when after 26 years of insurgency ending in 2009 and the LTT being thrown out, Mahendra Rajpaksha had to put the army chief in jail. Why? Because it was being, he alleged that the army chief was planning a coup, okay, to overthrow his regime and establish a military dictatorship. And and that is why he had to basically do what? He had to put the army chief in jail and appointed his brother as the army chief. Okay. World over, often the civil-military balance has always been a crucial question worth discussion. हमारे यहाँ ऐसा नहीं हुआ कभी in a major way. But this is why you see in any government, even in India, anything of a mutiny, if it happens within the army, is taken very seriously, because the army with its armed, or the army chiefs, etc., with their armed forces, can any day tip the balance against whom? Against the civilian government. कितना टाइम लगेगा आर्मी को दिल्ली के कैंटोनमेंट एरिया से ये लूटियंस तक आने में? अब बोला चलो अभी तुम सब जेल में लाइन से खड़े करो और अब तक 56. A military coup is not something which is very difficult for any army to do, given that they have the control of what? They have the control of the force, and the civilian government can do what at maximum? क्या कह सकते? Police. अरे what will police do against the army? वो लठ तो नहीं चलाएंगे, right? So one of the constant concerns is always about the civil-military balance, and even the British have this concern that if there is a major mutiny within the army, when in 1940, this is in 1946, World War II has come to an end. World War II has come to an end, and I'll tell you what is happening in Congress, और वो कहानी अलग से. But World War II has come to an end. British have fought a war almost for 6 years, where in Europe, losing a large number of lives, civilian lives, military lives, losing a large number of economic resources. They don't want to fight another war now, where in India, to suppress a armed uprising. That is why they are very concerned about what is happening in 1946. So what is happening? In November 1945, there is this INA trials. These INA trials evoke a lot of sympathy where? Amongst the Indian naval soldiers, or amongst the Indian soldiers in general. And within the Navy, you see it results in a mutiny, where Indian naval soldiers or naval ratings, starting from the Bombay Naval Port, actually rebelled against the European seniors, carved out, quit India on a number of naval ships, lowered the British flags on naval ships, and raised the Indian flags. They openly marched on the streets of Bombay and threatened the European seniors that they will kill the European seniors unless and until they withdrew. And this is a matter of grave concern, because it doesn't just happen in Bombay. Such a naval uprising soon spread to other areas, naval ports like Karachi, like Vishakhapatnam, like Madras. And the British are viewing this with concern. There was a small isolated mutiny which also broke out within the Royal Air Force in India, or the British Indian Air Force at that time. So the British are viewing this with much concern. And why does this mutiny broke out? Why did the mutiny broke out? Already there was racial discrimination की कहानी तो हमेशा से ही है. And that racial discrimination also meant discrimination in pay and promotion. On top of that, many within the army had much sympathy for these INA trial subjects, because many argued that they are being unfairly targeted, when the British had themselves left these INA soldiers at the mercy of the Japanese. And during the Rin Mutiny, they also demanded what? That these soldiers, INA soldiers, must be set free. The British and 1100 naval soldiers in Bombay mutinied, and soon it was followed by mutiny in other places. The British watched the INA mutiny with much concern. Ultimately, the mutiny was put down, but also the British promptly understood that the time of ruling India is up. In 2 years, twice within the army there have been gross acts of 2 to 3 years. Twice there have been gross acts of indiscipline. It prompts the British to consider an early withdrawal. Now, it prompts the British to consider an early withdrawal. But I am saying to consider an early withdrawal. I am not saying it prompts the British to consider a withdrawal, because the British were already considering a withdrawal. But it forces their hand further. Why were the British already considering a withdrawal? Because World War II had come to an end. to the Congress, etc., they had been giving offers saying that when World War ends, we will set up a constituent assembly. And if they don't, so anyways they had to withdraw. It is convincing them that their time to withdraw has come sooner than partly they had expected. So that, their hold over the army is falling apart. And if their hold over the most important instrument of ruling India is falling apart, it is time that they withdraw when they can. Otherwise, if there is a big armed mutiny, even the lives of British officials, their families would be in danger. So the Rhin mutiny forces them to promptly consider a withdrawal. Their immediate response is, firstly, all cases against INA trial subjects are dropped. All cases against INA trial subjects are dropped and they are released. Secondly, what they say is, we will send in the next mission, and that is the cabinet mission plan. I have not told you the Wavell plan, but वो मैं भी बताऊंगा. That happens in 1945. Before this, INA trial and Rhin mutiny in 1945 happened Wavell plan. लेकिन वो अलग बात है. That we'll talk in terms of Congress. But here, the Rhin mutiny is ultimately triggering what? The British to consider a early devolution of power, and they firstly released the INA trial subjects from jail, and secondly also did what? Firstly they released INA trial subjects from jail, and secondly they introduced the cabinet mission plan. अब आपके दिमाग में एक और क्वेश्चन आ सकता है कि सर, what is the viewpoint of the Congress on Rhin mutiny, in the Royal Indian Navy mutiny? Well, the Congress response is more complicated. In the sense, what is Gandhi's mutiny? Gandhi advises these Royal Indian Navy soldiers to go back to the Navy and follow the orders of the European seniors. And if they want to join the nationalist struggle, they must resign from the Navy and they can join the nationalist struggle. He is not very keen on an armed mutiny. Why? It may happen again after independence. More importantly, as I just told you, it will tip the balance in favor of whom? The military. Vis-a-vis whom? The civilians. For so long, the Congress and the civilian political parties had been building momentum against the British. And at the last, if the military is the one which captures power from the British, then who will regain the hold of power once the British are gone? Military. They do not want this situation to develop. Gandhi advises these soldiers to return to barracks and to resign if they wanted to participate in the freedom struggle. Also, there could be a violent outbreak. That is also the Congress is willing to avoid. That is the viewpoint of the Congress and Gandhi. Not everybody though agreed with viewpoint of Gandhi within Congress. Leaders like Aruna Asif Ali, Sucheta Kriplani, they were of the opinion, these were the women leaders, they were of the opinion कि नहीं, इन्हें आने दो. Congress must encourage the Rhin mutiny further, but the Congress did not. Okay, that's also there. अभी मोदी जी को ये भी history बता देनी चाहिए. He can pick this point also against the Congress, right? That they're not, Congress is a party which has never supported what? Indian army. So, but logic की क्या ज़रूरत है? वैसे भी नहीं ज़रूरत है ना? तो बस इतना बोल देंगे लोग वैसे ही मान लेंगे कि क्यों, why did the Congress did not support is another matter, but the Congress did not. That's enough. अगला इलेक्शन इसी बात पर लड़ लेते. 1946, the Royal Indian Navy or the naval uprising or the naval uprising or the Royal Indian Navy mutiny happened in 1946 as the INA trials evoked a strong positive sentiment or a strong sympathetic sentiment from Indian naval ratings in January 1946. 1100 naval troops, 1100 uh, naval ratings stationed in January 1946, 1100 naval ratings stationed in Bombay. 1100 naval ratings stationed in Bombay. Naval ratings stationed in Bombay openly defied orders of their European seniors, carved out Quit India on British naval ships, carved out Quit India on British naval ships, carved out Quit India on British naval ships, and raised Indian flags by lowering British flags. Such uprisings soon spread to Karachi, Madras, Visakhapatnam, forcing the British to consider a prompt withdrawal forcing the British to consider a prompt withdrawal as their control over army, the chief instrument of British control, underwent as the control over army, the chief instrument of British control, underwent a decline. Yes, the immediate consequence it forced the British to release the INA trial subjects, and all cases were dropped against them. And secondly, to promptly move towards sending what? The cabinet mission, sending the cabinet mission plan of 1946 to send what? The cabinet mission plan of 1946. Yes. Cabinet mission plan of 1946. ठीक है? Yes. Cabinet mission plan 1940. Written. Now, so agar aap say, so if they give you, firstly, they can give you a direct question. One direct question they can give you is discuss the, the role of INA, ये question आया हुआ है पहले. Discuss the role of INA uprising and Rin mutiny in the Indian freedom struggle. This is the rule. The other question they can give you is discuss the impact of World War II on the Indian freedom struggle. So what will you write there? So what is, when you talk about the impact of World War II on the Indian freedom struggle, when you talk about the impact of World War II on the Indian freedom struggle, there are two kinds of impacts. One is the rise of this militant nationalism. The other is what? The response of Congress and the things that we had talked about, right? And that is from the Wardha session to the Quit India movement, which basically happened due to the failure of Cripps mission. Immediate cause for which was the failure of Cripps mission. All of these events also are the impact of World War II or not? Yes, that all that negotiations, whether the individual satyagrahas, whether Congress launching the individual satyagrahas or the British sending the Cripps mission or the Congress starting the Quit India movement, all of that is getting influenced by what? The revolt of, all of that is getting influenced by World War II. Yes? तो आप आंसर में कैसे लिखेंगे? आपको दोनों चीजें लिखनी है. Militant response to the involvement of Indian in World War II is what? This nationalism during the 1940s, INA, etc. And this is what? The Congress response to the involvement of Indian in World War II, which involves individual satyagrahas, which involves the Quit India movement, and it involves the British responses in the form of proposals of Cripps mission, August offer, Wavell plan. We'll talk about the Wavell plan also right now. This much is clear? That is how you have to formulate your answer then. ठीक है? Yes? Any doubts till here? Okay. Now, the next thing that we are talking is back to the Congress, what is happening in 1940s. After what? The failure of the Cripps mission. Congress ने बोला बहुत हुआ. They are taking us very lightly. Okay, now is the time that we have given them enough chance, and basically we have waited long enough. We can't keep waiting. We need to build more pressure on the British. And to build more pressure on the British, Congress and Gandhi are saying that it is the time to launch Quit India movement. It is the time to launch Quit India movement. That this, Gandhi said, must be the final struggle that we'll have to carry out against the British. And this is to be the final struggle that, and Gandhi gave the slogan of do or die. अभी do or die का मतलब ये नहीं है that Gandhi is giving a call for violence. Gandhi is saying that we will continue our struggle only through non-violent means, but either we'll achieve independence or we'll die in the process of doing so. But we'll not give up on our demand. Right? जैसे आप कसम खा के हैं, कई लोग ऐसे सोचते हैं कि हम तो बन के ही जाएंगे घर वापस, वरना नहीं जाएंगे. ऐसा नहीं सोचना है. Contrary to whatever people may say, many other people and may say this कि नहीं, you should be very determined. I am saying be very determined, but ऐसा सोचने की कोई जरूरत नहीं है. और भी चीजें हैं जीवन में करने के लिए, है ना? ऐसा कुछ नहीं है कि नहीं बन के ही जाएंगे और ना शक्ल नहीं दिखाएंगे आज के बाद, कसम खा के आए हैं हम तो. ऐसा कुछ नहीं. All this, see, one thing that is expected from not just a civil servant but a very sensible individual is level-headedness. Passion is one thing, है ना? And passion must be there to achieve your goal. But passion must not become, it's not a license to be nonsensical. Okay? Then, you know, it doesn't help also. A lot of times it builds unnecessary pressure. ऐसा क्या हुआ क्या कि सचिन तेंदुलकर ने वर्ल्ड कप नहीं जीता था तो उसने बोला अपना शक्ल नहीं दिखाऊंगा, नहीं खेलूंगा वापस. Was it there that such, you know, I think I very distinctly, that was the last time I was watching cricket, so I remember. 2003 finals, right? अरे अभी वो ऑस्ट्रेलिया ने इतना धोया, रिकी पॉन्टिंग ने इतना धोया, 350 रन बनाने, right? And then you know, yeah, whatever. And basically then you see what, that Tendulkar gets out relatively early. तो ऐसा कहते हैं अब तो मैं बैटिंग नहीं उठाऊंगा, मर ही जाता हूं मैं, कूद जाता हूं मैं. You have to understand that big tasks, if you are trying big tasks and you are not prepared to face failures, you are a fool. Nothing else. If you are trying to do something which is big task में ही failure होने का chance है. और जितना बड़ा टास्क होगा उतना बड़ा फेलियर होने का भी चांस है. अगर आप चांस नहीं ले सकते तो आप बड़े काम करने की मत सोचिए. इफ यू कांट डील विथ फेलियर्स इन लाइफ, डोंट थिंक ऑफ डूइंग बिग थिंग्स इन लाइफ. देयर इज नो वन पर्सन यू कैन पॉइंट आउट हु हैज नॉट फेस्ड फेलियर्स एंड येट डन बिग थिंग्स. ऐसा कोई मिलेगा ही नहीं आपको. Okay? So if you're thinking of big things in life, then be prepared for facing failures. वो आएंगे. और अगर आपके फेलियर जीवन में आप बोले कि मैं आई हैव डन एवरीथिंग इन फर्स्ट अटेम्प्ट इन माय लाइफ, मतलब आपने आज तक कुछ बड़ा कभी करने का सोचा ही नहीं, है ना? सो इफ यू ड्रीम बिग, बी prepared that dreaming big and putting in efforts is not enough. You have to understand that big tasks require time, are more complicated, and your path will have failure. So इसमें dishearten होने का कोई जरूरत नहीं कि अरे नहीं हुआ अभी मैं कूद जाता हूँ छत से. This old trend of taking too much pressure doesn't help your cause, and your life is more valuable than UPSC. Right? Nothing you will achieve by first rank also. Let me tell you this. है ना? You are not going to be the first individual to get a first rank. हर साल आती है एक फर्स्ट रैंक, है ना? ऐसा नहीं है कि आप प्लैनेट अर्थ पे पहली बार फर्स्ट रैंक या मून पे आप पहली बार जा रहे हैं. एक एग्जाम में आपकी पहली रैंक आ रही है. और जो मैं बार बार कहता हूं, nothing of significance in this world has been achieved by the middle class who believes that they can achieve something earth shaking by taking one out of 4 options. ना प्रधानमंत्री बनता है कोई, ना चीफ मिनिस्टर बनता है, ना आर्मी चीफ बनता है, ना कोई बड़ा नेता बनता है, ना कोई बड़ा फिल्म स्टार बनता है, ना कोई बड़ा क्रिकेटर बनता है, स्पोर्ट्समैन बनता है, कुछ नहीं बनता है, ना इनोवेटर बनता है 4 में से एक ऑप्शन पर टिक करके. So it's okay. One must dream big, do your effort, everything. Don't take too much tension. मेहनत करिए. होता है बहुत अच्छी बात है, नहीं होता है आपका लॉस नहीं है, देश का लॉस है. Right? इतना टेंशन नहीं लेना है. नहीं हो रहा तो कोई बात नहीं. Right? So if you look at Jawaharlal Nehru and Subhash Chandra Bose, right? Jawaharlal Nehru never wrote the civil services. Subhash Chandra Bose got selected but did not join. If they would have been civil servants, they would have been other bureaucrats, है ना? तो बट उन्हें नेतागिरी करनी थी, तो वो नेतागिरी में है. So you can do big in life, even if you don't make it to सिविल सर्विसेज, तो मेरा तो हमेशा से यही कहना है, इट इज नॉट मेंट टू डिसहार्टन, इट इज ओनली मेंट टू टेल कि वन मस्ट नॉट वर्क विद द फियर ऑफ फेलियर इन माइंड. इफ यू हैव, इसको साइकोलॉजी में कहते हैं इंट्रिंसिक मोटिवेशन. एक्सट्रिंसिक मोटिवेशन ये है, अरे फेल हो गया, जमाना क्या कहेगा, घर वाले क्या कहेंगे, इसलिए भेजा था क्या, राइट? बट इफ यू डू इंट्रिंसिक मोटिवेशन, that I am doing this because it is something that helps me achieve my life goals. Happens, very good. Doesn't happen, it's okay, I'll figure out other ways to achieve my life goals. You will perform better because the stress that you will take will be less. Right? So intrinsic motivation होना चाहिए, extrinsic नहीं कि बड़ी कार मिलेगी. मतलब कई लोगों का ये मोटिवेशन है, बड़ी कार मिलेगी, लोग सलाम ठोकेंगे, ये होगा वो होगा, फिर आप जाएंगे अंदर, जब आप रियलाइज हो करेंगे कि कुछ नहीं होगा ऐसा, शुरू में तो नहीं होगा एटलीस्ट, राइट? सो इन दैट कॉन्टेक्स्ट, बी इंट्रिंसिकली मोटिवेटेड, यू विल डू मच बेटर. इंट्रिंसिक मोटिवेशन इज व्हाट इज रिक्वायर्ड. व्हेन इंट्रिंसिक मोटिवेशन क्या होता है? यू आर नॉट कंपीटिंग विद एनीबडी एल्स, यू आर ओनली कंपीटिंग विद योरसेल्फ. जीवन में लेवल वही होना चाहिए. व्हेन यू आर कॉम्पिटिशन इज ओनली विद योरसेल्फ, नॉट विद योर पीयर. अरे वो शर्मा जी के बेटा फर्स्ट बार में हो गया था, आपका तीसरी बार में भी नहीं हो रहा है, आप क्यों जिंदा हैं? So this should not happen. All these mindsets, all these mindsets are not at all productive. Intrinsic रहिए कि हाँ, मैंने पिछली बार दिया था, यार नहीं हुआ था, प्रीलिम्स में भी नहीं हुआ था, इस बार दिया, मेरा प्रीलिम्स में हो गया, अभी मैं मेंस भी दे के आया हूँ. That is a reason enough to be happy and satisfied and keep working. Everybody's trajectory is different. ऐसा हो सकता है कि यार मेरा प्रीलिम्स में नहीं हुआ, 2 बार नहीं हुआ भी टेंशन है, लेकिन हाँ मेरी मेंस की तैयारी अच्छी है, एक बार प्रीलिम्स हो जाए, I am definitely sure that I've been writing answers, I've been doing all it takes for mains. Opportunity will present and I will stay determined till I get it. So you be patient. Everybody's trajectory is different. Some people कि अभी इंटरव्यू दे के आए, अभी नहीं हुआ, और फिर 10 दिन बाद प्रीलिम्स है. So some people may be disheartened कि यार अभी रहने ही देते हैं इस साल, तो नहीं. If you are intrinsically motivated, you will raise yourself again and start working towards it. That is what is required. Mental stability सबसे ज़्यादा ज़रूरी है इस एग्जाम के लिए, and patience. Apart from hard work and determination. और patience बनने के लिए intrinsic motivation ज़रूरी है, extrinsic नहीं, है ना? So that is there. So for example, my extrinsic motivation was मैं दिल्ली छोड़ दूंगा, बस मेरे को नहीं रहना दिल्ली में. So then I had to make peace with, so one of the things you have to understand is the better you are intrinsically motivated, the better you will do in life. And the sooner you pick up this trait, farther you will go in life, चाहे कहीं भी जाएं, है ना? So that is it. चलिए हम वापस आते हैं, बहुत हो गया आज का ज्ञान, right? So in 1943, what is happening? This is also very important from your prelims point of view. The Bengal famine. Firstly, in 1942, what is happening is that Gandhi and Congress launched the Quit India mission with the slogan of do or launched the Quit India movement or the Quit India mission with the slogan of do or die. The failure of what? The failure of the Cripps mission convinced Gandhi and Congress to launch a determined convinced Gandhi and Congress to launch a determined mass what? Struggle. Convinced Gandhi and Congress to launch a determined mass struggle. Now, Gandhi and Congress did launch it on August 8th, 1942 from Bombay. Okay? But on August 8th, on the midnight of August 8th and the beginning of August 9th, 1942, what was the British response? The British response was to crack down on the Quit India movement. So on August 8th, they gave a call for the Quit India movement, and on the night of August 8th itself, and the beginning of August 9th, on August 9, 1942, all top Congress leaders were what? Imprisoned. All top Congress leaders were what? Imprisoned. And thus, the leadership of Congress now moved into hands of women leaders, like are into the hands of middle level Congress leaders, not the top leaders, but in the hands of middle level Congress leaders like Sucheta Kriplani, Aruna Asaf Ali, Sucheta Kriplani, Aruna Asaf Ali. They were Usha Mehta. These were women leaders who did what? They went underground as the top Congress leaders were imprisoned and secretly started coordinating activities between Congress-led protests, and they escaped imprisonment and led the Quit India movement during this period. Now, one thing I did not tell you is in the INA also there was a separate contingent. There was a separate contingent that was formed for women soldiers in the INA, and that was called the Rani Ki Jhansi Ki Rani Regiment. Okay, that was led by Latika Ghosh and Lakshmi Sehgal, both of them. So just this is also something that you must remember about INA. You can write there in INA that Jhansi Ki Rani Regiment was formed, and this was led by Latika Ghosh and Lakshmi Sehgal. This was led by Latika Ghosh and Lakshmi Sehgal. One more fun fact, a number of there also under Subhash within the INA another contingent had been formed, just like the Jhansi Ki Rani Regiment. Another regiment was formed in the name of Jawaharlal Nehru also, under Bose's leadership. So it's partly to signify, what this partly signifies is that it's not that the relationship between Congress leaders and Bose was very bitter at this point of time, but Bose had partly chosen a different strategy. That is also there. Now, this is what is happening in 1942. And what do they resort to again? An open boycott of British goods, burning of British goods was organized, and adoption of Swadeshi. Mass protests erupted the very next day. On August 9, 1942, mass protests erupted in a major fashion as news spread about the imprisonment of Gandhi, Nehru, and many other top Congress leaders. And you see that this caused more resentment and more protests against the British. And these protests continued almost for a year by till 1943. And in 1943, another thing happened which further gave fuel to these protests. And what is that? The Bengal famine. Okay? The Bengal famine is considered a very important event that you must know from your prelims point of view again. Okay? The Great Bengal Famine of 1943 of 1943, what was this famine about? Why was it caused? ये आपको पता होना चाहिए prelims के लिए. The Great Bengal Famine of 1943 caused further protests against whom? British rule. Caused further protests against British rule. Just a second. Caused further protests against British rule. Now, why were they triggered? What triggered the Great Bengal Famine? What is a famine? What is a drought? Deficit rainfall और much lower than, उसका भी कुछ फॉर्मूला होता है, कुछ स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन, कुछ है ना, कि मेरा काम नहीं है, आप ही का काम है जानना, है ना. That is a drought, much below the average rainfall for a particular year or over the pattern of the past few years. That is what? A drought. Then what is a famine? Lack of food, shortage. कुछ और डिफरेंस भी है? अच्छा. Anything else? कुछ और सोच सकते हैं आप? है लेकिन अवेलेबल नहीं है. Okay. Now drought. Every drought doesn't lead to a famine. That's the difference. Famines often happen when there is a drought, but every drought doesn't lead to a famine. Droughts to happen abhi bhi. But it is often said that in post-independent India there has been no major incidence of famine. So even though droughts happen today also, famines are not common or are highly uncommon. So famines are highly uncommon. Why are famines highly uncommon? Surplus food grains, you will say we have. So, देखिए, famines, we say, very important point, famine is a man-made disaster. Drought तो बारिश कम हुई, तो आप क्या कर सकते हैं? बरसात तो पाएंगे नहीं. अभी इतनी तो टेक्नोलॉजी नहीं है कि आप बोलेंगे आप सर क्लाउड सीडिंग है? कुछ नहीं है, ठीक है. अल्टीमेटली हाउ डज क्लाउड सीडिंग अफेक्ट एवरीथिंग इज ऑल. अबे हमें ये तो पता नहीं है मॉनसून क्यों होता है, कैसे होता है. क्लाउड सीडिंग से क्या इफेक्ट आएगा, क्या नहीं आएगा, इट इज नॉट वेरी कैलकुलेबल. ओके, सो इन द सेंस दैट एवरेज, so low rainfall is a natural thing, but how do you manage that low rainfall determines whether the drought will become a famine or not, because in famine there is a shortage of food, water, etc., which cause a large scale loss of lives, human lives, animal lives, all lives. Okay, so that is something it leads to food shortages, food crisis, etc., but not every drought, because when the drought is happening, ऐसा है क्या कि एकदम से बारिश नहीं हुई? आपने देखा होगा इंडियन एक्सप्रेस में आया था अभी आर्टिकल, that already the interior regions of Maharashtra are staring at a water shortage, right? So there is an impending crisis where water rainfall has already been low, and because of which it is a drought-like situation. But if the government proactively manages from now on, it can prevent it from becoming what? A famine. Matlab, government makes okay, ensures that availability of water is ensured or food supply is ensured. That is what prevents it from becoming a famine. That's the difference between a drought and a famine. That is why we are saying what? This is a famine. When I'm using the word famine means it is much more than merely average or low rainfall. It is actually a man-made disaster. Drought is natural disaster. Famine is man-made disaster. तो आप देखिए क्या होता है कि आप अगेन हम जो भी चीजें पढ़ते हैं उसके पीछे का अगर आप लॉजिक में घुसेंगे देन इट इज इजियर टू अंडरस्टैंड एनीथिंग एंड रिमेंबर ऑल्सो दैट इज व्हाई famine is a man-made calamity. Okay, that is there. And when we use the word famine means who is responsible here? British. So what is happening in the Great Bengal famine of 1943 is this, that it was triggered by what? By firstly low rainfall. For a couple of years, no rainfall due in successive years. But that is not enough. You have to have what? A clear mismanagement. What was the clear mismanagement? If there is low rainfall, there will be low food production. So what do? Import food so that you prevent that shortage from becoming a crisis. So, but the food imports from and rice imports predominantly. Bengali kya khata hai? Rice. Right. So rice imports, food or rice imports from Burma had stopped. Why? Primarily because who had occupied Burma? Japan. Okay, so the Japanese were taking control of Burma, so rice imports from Burma stopped. And also because food production was low, so food anyways was limited in amount. Where was this food being diverted to? To the army, to meet the requirements of the army, away from civilians. So food was being diverted to meet, or food grains were being diverted to meet the needs of the army. And this led to what? High prices for whom? Civilians. And this is all triggering the Great Bengal famine, in which more than 1 million people were affected in the region. Okay, so that is something which is happening in 1943, the Great Bengal famine. Now, why is this? This is triggering more resentment against whom? British, adding more fuel to the protests already going on. So this is also something that you must know, which is partly a result, an outcome of World War II. Low rainfall plus World War II makes what? The Great Bengal famine of 1943. Now, what is happening is that in 1945, World War II is coming to an end. And World War II is coming to an end. So it is at this time the British introduce what? When World War II is coming to an end, the British introduce, what is the immediate outcome gained by Congress after the Quit India movement? Nothing. Immediately after Quit India movement, Congress is not, neither are they doing nor are they dying. Perhaps Gandhi was wrong. देखिए ऐसा होता है जीवन में, इसीलिए मैंने बोला कोई लोड लेने की जरूरत नहीं है, और भी एक तीसरा आउटकम है, आप जिंदा रह सकते हैं और कुछ और कर सकते हैं, है ना. So no do or die, ऐसा कुछ नहीं सोचना कभी भी, है ना. There is nothing in this life worth dying for, है ना. तो अगर कुछ होता तो सब मर जाते अभी तक, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, मेरा ये व्यू है. So there must be something worth living for ना. ये मरने का जो शौक है ना, जब पुराने गाने सुनते थे, सैड सॉन्ग, मर जाएंगे इसके लिए उसके लिए, कुछ नहीं मरना है. 1945, what is happening? The British, as World War II is coming to end, the British proposed what? The Wavell Plan. Now आपका पहला सवाल होगा कि सर अभी जब World War II का end आ गया and now तो they don't require troops, then why should they propose a Wavell Plan? No, mutiny तो अभी नहीं हुई है. Mutiny happens in 46. So why should they propose a plan? Well, the answer for this comes partly from world history. Is that World War II is coming to an end, and Soviet Union had said that we support independence struggles everywhere in Asia and Africa. Post World War II is the beginning of the Cold War, and it is USA which is telling Britain that in your colonies, including in India, not just about India, but about Britain, USA is telling Britain and France that you must consider devolving powers to your colonies. Why? Because if you don't, it won't solve the problem, but it will force the nationalist movements in these countries to side with whom? The communists. Okay, I'll explain this more in world history. Communists are saying that we support nationalist uprisings everywhere, including in India. Now if Britain tries to hold on to India and says we will not devolve power, then Indians' nationalist struggle will develop proximity to whom? Communism. And this is not something that they want, because then India may tilt more towards communism or the Soviet Union. So USA is saying, why is USA saying that Britain and France, you must consider devolving power to your colonies? Why? Because he doesn't want them to shift towards communism. Just one more thing. He doesn't want them to shift towards communism. But why is USA still saying so? Also USA could say so because USA did not have a colony of its own. So USA is saying, suggesting, it's not that Britain and France are bound to agree, but USA is putting also pressure that you must consider a devolution of power. And anyways, when already the British have done what? Already the British have proposed something in Cripps mission. And now that the war is getting over, they can't say now, when the war is getting over, it is very obvious that the Congress will sooner or later again raise demands. So they can't ignore the question, having committed something before or having proposed something before, that proposal is not simply going to vanish. Even though rejected by the Congress will continue to press for further devolution, right? So they are saying, anyways, you have promised something and you will have to sooner or later negotiate. Also, why can't you aim at forcibly suppressing the revolt or forcibly suppressing the uprising? Because that will require a large number of troops. And already Britain and France have fought a hugely expensive World War II, in which they have not which has been expensive, but they've lost a large number of troops also. So in Britain and France, the public sentiment is against involvement of their troops in any war for any reason. So they can't be even thinking of moving in large number of troops to suppress the nationalist uprising. They also fear that Indians may shift, the nationalist movement may tilt towards communism, and they don't want this to happen in the Cold War era. And so they are considering a devolution of power. This is the background. Yeah, you wanted to ask.
That is not my question. Is this the only reason that USA don't have colonies, therefore they are saying that?
No, I told you, right, that it's not the only reason that USA don't have colonies. Their more fear is that these countries may shift towards communism. ठीक है? So it's not कि US की वजह से हमें इंडिपेंडेंस, देखिए फालतू के कंक्लूजन नहीं बनाने. मैंने ये नहीं बोला कि US की वजह से हमें इंडिपेंडेंस मिल रही है, कि US ने ब्रिटेन को बोला छोड़ दो तो ब्रिटेन ने छोड़ दी, ऐसा नहीं है. It is just one of the contributory factors. So in 1945, the British introduced the Wavell Plan as World War II came to an end. Under this Wavell Plan, they proposed what? again, you must remember, under this Waiver plan, they proposed under the Waiver plan, they proposed what? The same, first, dominion status. But something else which is different. Yes, one of the ways to remember this is firstly you remember only the differences. Okay? तो ये समझ लीजिए कि सारे plans में from August offer to the last Mountbatten plan, what is proposed is dominion status. Okay? Nowhere they are proposing complete independence. Okay? That's one thing which is common. तो common चीज को याद रखने की जरूरत ही नहीं है, difference को याद रखिए. Okay? क्या? August offer Constituent Assembly composed mainly of Indians. Crips India only of Indians. यहाँ पे they are saying that except, firstly they said that except Viceroy and the army and the commander-in-chief of the army, all positions will be devolved to Indians. Except the commander-in-chief of the army and the viceroy, all positions will be devolved to Indians. Matlab they are saying कि we are giving you everything short of the leadership of the army and the top position of the executive. All other positions will be given to Indians. Constituent Assembly will anyways be established with Indians only. So all of this will give to you. Also, the Waiver plan proposed something else also. A Constituent Assembly would have equal representation of Hindus and Muslims. Ultimately, dominion status, what is the difference between all these dominion status? Is that all of them are dominions. Dominion का मतलब क्या है? They are a part of the British crown. ठीक है? Ultimate ruler is British crown. They are all a part of British crown. फर्क क्या है? फर्क ये है that how many powers will be devolved to Indians. That is the, so it's a concept. जैसे क्या होता है? कश्मीर में बोल रहे हैं हमें चाहिए आज़ादी. अरे आज़ादी का मतलब क्या है? Azadi under the Indian Constitution, does Azadi mean that you want to retain Article 370 or you want to separate from India? What does Azadi mean? Again, what does dominion status mean? It is changing from time to time. But basically the basic idea is more autonomy and more devolution of power to whom? Indians. Okay? So in that context, you see that the Constituent Assembly would have equal representation of Hindus and Muslims. They have proposed this also. Now, they proposed this also. Now, what is the Congress response? The Congress is like, the Congress is okay. The Congress objection is primarily on the dominion status whole thing. But beyond that, they don't have any major objections to begin with. But Muslim League says something about this proposal that becomes the objection for the Congress. The Muslim League said that, the Muslim League argued that all Muslim representatives what? All Muslim representatives must be the representatives of Muslim League, or only Muslim League will get the right to appoint Muslim members to the Constituent Assembly. Meaning what? That the Congress cannot. So or basically all Muslim members will be appointed only by the Muslim League. So indirectly it means that Congress leaders like Abdul Kalam Azad, you know, Maulana Abdul Kalam and many other leaders, they could not what? Be appointed by Congress. And essentially this meant that it's not that the Muslim League was only saying by this statement, the Muslim League was not only saying that it was a representative of Muslim. That though it had always been saying. What they're saying now is that they are the only representative of Muslims and the Congress can only represent Hindu interest because they can't send any Muslims. So basically the Congress opposed Muslim League attempts to label it as a Hindu organization and rejected the Muslim League demand. क्योंकि Constituent Assembly में तो there would be all major political parties would be represented. So Congress and Muslim League must come to a settlement. But Muslim League is making this irrational demand that only it must get to appoint Muslim members to the legislative, to the Constituent Assembly. Congress rejects this demand. Wavell announced. What was the British response? The British response was that Wavell announced, who was the viceroy at this time, Wavell announced the breakdown of Wavell announced the breakdown of talks. Wavell said that we too are ready to devolve power, but the Congress and Muslim League are fighting amongst themselves. They can't come to a conclusion. So, if they can't come to a conclusion, what can we do? We will devolve power once a conclusion is reached or a consensus is reached amongst the major political parties, including the Muslim League and the Congress. That is why the Wavell plan broke down or it failed. This is the major reason why the Wavell plan broke down. Congress as one is the objection with dominion status, but there is other major objection is with this thing. That's there about 1945 you need to know. We have largely done till 1946. We only have to discuss two more things, Cabinet Mission Plan and the Mountbatten Plan, 1946 and 47, and that's independence. And in the next class, what we'll do is, we'll talk about other things predominantly, like communalism and partition, like peasant movements, tribal movements, okay? Some of those things, names, facts, issues that are important from your prelims point of view, okay? So one more class I think we need, that is. Tomorrow, we can have the class tomorrow also. Either we'll have the class or you'll have the art and culture class, whatever it is there. So I am to anyways free, but it depends. Because your art and culture, कल भी है ना, हाँ तो फिर मैं कल लूँगा. अगर है, pardon? वो हो जाएगा clear अभी थोड़ी देर में. Okay. So that I have those PowerPoint presentations been uploaded. Social reforms का नहीं हुआ. Okay, I'll